All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for Bringing It Home. We are thrilled to have you here for another episode where we spend time discussing previous webinars and really diving in and doing the work, sharing the journey that we're all taking with one another. I'm Missy Rentz. I'm with the Wellbeing Project. I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Isak. He'll be helping us with the webinar today. If you were here last time, you know the format, but just as a quick refresher, we'll have a little bit of conversation and reflection, a little bit of practice, and also dive into a few breakout sessions so that there can be some work done by all of us and some really meaningful conversation. So again, thank you for joining us. And with that, I will hand it over to Reggie and Sharon. Thank you for hosting us and holding space for us yet again this month.
Yeah, absolutely. Missy, thank you. Izaki, thank you. And blessings to all. Happy to have you here. Again, so a couple reflections before we get into practice, and then we'll have a broader conversation. But in going back and forth with Missy over the past week, she was like, in my calendar, this project is called SAFE, because it's sitting at the feet of the elders. But in her calendar, it's called SAFE. So that really stuck with me because, as we were in pre-production yesterday, like I've had a really rough month. Like I've had 5 deaths in my family, like 2 elders have transitioned. Like it's just been really intense. And I said, it's hard to commit to anything for a long period of time, but to commit to this for a year, this is like coming home, right? So like to be in planning sessions with Missy and Sharon and folks, and then coming back to be of service with you is like coming home. And so, like, with gratitude for the chance to find refuge with one another, resource, and then upon resourcing, return to the work that we do with a little bit of a more heart-centered focus than because it's really easy to feel right now. So let's begin with a little bit of practice. So the way I do this is like get into your shoulders at first, because we sit like this for hours. So remind the shoulders what it feels like to find gentle, purposeful movement. Maybe the neck gets involved just to find a little bit of somatic release before we find stillness. And then maybe wrists come together. Maybe you stretch the fingers, or maybe you just sit still, but spend the next 10 seconds or so finding fluid movement and space in the body in direct defiance to our hunched over lifestyles. It's me, y'all. There's got to be a little benevolent defiance. It's kind of how I get down. And then settling into a posture that allows you to feel spacious, supported, and dignified. Eyes open or closed, whatever feels comfortable for you in this moment. And just settle into right now. Be present with the body and the breath. Be present with the purposeful connection of people through virtual airwaves, talking about life, service, compassion, in the seasons of life. Allowing ourselves to rest in the humanity and divinity of purposeful connection. For those of you who were with us earlier this month when we were sitting with Parker, what a beautiful experience. We'll be reflecting on some of that today. But before we get into any of that, just find stillness, find connection to the breath, and by proxy, connection to one another. Settling into the strength of community rather than the myth of individualism. we'll conclude our meditative time together. Just a simple presencing and settling with 3 tolls of this ancient bowl. Sitting at the feet of the elders is not just sitting at the feet of the elders in person. I have a plethora of antique singing bowls. So as you hear the toll of this bell through the interwebs, hear the ancient wisdom and feel it through sound. 3 tolls. As the sound fades away, make gentle movements and release the meditation, welcoming yourself back to the space as you're ready. Thank you all for that. Only 5 minutes, but didn't that feel great? It doesn't take a long time to find your peace, does it? It really doesn't. With that, I'll toss to Sharon for whatever thoughts she may have, and then we'll get into some conversation.
Hello, everybody. Listening to that sound, made me remember a poem which I am just now looking up for Reggie, particularly, but really for everybody. There's a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye, which I won't go into the whole poem, but she's talking about sometimes you don't really feel like being mindlessly social. You feel more like you want to be connected to yourself. And when she says that you encounter people and they're trying to somehow draw you in, she says, when someone you haven't seen in 10 years appears at the door, don't start singing him all your new songs. You will never catch up. Walk around feeling like a leaf. Know you could tumble any second. Then decide what to do with your time. And somehow, earlier in the poem, she says, it's not that you don't love them anymore. You're trying to remember something too important to forget. Trees, the monastery bell at twilight. That's how I thought of you, and this poem, Reggie, as soon as you rang that beautiful sound. And it was such a beckoning sound, like, come toward me. Come gather. Let's gather. Let's get together. That it was just beautiful. The monastery bell at twilight. Let's come together and remember what we really care about.
Thank you for that, and just welcome to all. Happy to have you here. And what we're going to do today is because this is the practice period element of, so the way that sitting at the feet of the elders is structured is that we have like a robust conversation at the beginning of the month and reconnect together at the end of the month just to distill, right? To distill and to be in community around that distillation. And for those of you that were with us at the beginning of the month, Parker read this poem that was just like, right? So the poem was like that in general. And then in Parker's like cadence, it's just like, wow, man. So I'm going to do my best to read the poem in my cadence, bearing in mind that I'm an elder in training. Like I'm not the esteemed Parker Palmer, but give me a couple years, right? So like, hopefully I'll be able to mimic the cadence. And what I invite you to do is either read along with me or just find that same meditative posture that we just held and listen and hold space for the words to fall on you. So if you don't want to do as much work, allow me to do the work and allow the words to fall on your ears. And then we'll go into breakout groups to discuss the poem and a few other questions. But for those of you that did not have the benefit of hearing it, the poem is When Death Comes by Mary Oliver. So I'll begin reading now. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, When death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what's it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I've made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. I'll read it again a little slower. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what's it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I've made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. So a moment of silent reflection on the poem individually. And then transitioning toward our groups, our breakout groups. But before we do that, Sharon, if you have any thoughts before we transition.
I just love that, particularly that line about the field of daisies, And I feel not only the many centuries of being stretching behind us, but those to come, and the just the pattern of life, the boundlessness of life, and all directions and past and future. And here we are. It's like a little flower, one, poke it up, and so unique, and also so much a part of this whole. So I kept going back to that line again and again.
Mm-hmm. So Isaac, if you could break into breakout groups, and we would ask you to, so it's going to be kind of free form here because this is kind of where we are in life these days, but either a general reflection on the poem, or there's a question that we asked Parker last week that we thought would be of benefit to all, is working with fear, right? Because the thing that, as I read the poem again, the last part is like, I don't want to have visited this world. Visited means a spectator, which requires, like, to be a non-spectator requires courage, which means to find a space for fear, right? So if Missy and Isaac, if you could put the question in the chat for people to consider. And we'll be in breakouts for about 12 minutes or so, I guess, because we want to have a robust discussion at the end. And if we end a little early, we all could do well with that, right? By the look on everyone's face, it seems as though decent conversations were had. You're all like beaming and bright, so thank you for that. Would anyone care to share, excuse me, what you talked about or any reflections that you have? We're open for that, and that's kind of the aegis of why we're here. So if anyone would care to share either individually or for their group, please do so. Sheila.
Hi. Sheila from Canada. Hello. So a couple of comments that were made in the group that really stuck with me. One was facing fear empowers us and allows us to release the fear. And this is coming from a wise woman in my group, so not me. I'm just sharing what the group had to say. And how at some point in our life, we're going to need to let go of the fear. So, the hanging on to it is the opportunity to continue the suffering. And then the other reflection I had was how art is such a window into looking at different possibilities. So the poetry and the beautiful sound that you made this morning that you gave us just felt like such a huge possibility. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The facing fear empowers is a beautiful reminder. And the one thing is that I think that the poem talks about that at the end. Like, I don't want to have been here just as a visitor. Like, for me, that speaks totally to fear. Like, I have a great aunt. She passed when she was 97. Longevity is big in my family. And her name was Aunt Emily. So Aunt Emily, my family's super interesting because, like, we're all different colors of blackness, right? So we have some people that can pass and some people that are dark skinned, right? So Aunt Emily could pass. So she had a really different life experience, but she would always tell us, the young ones, she was like, baby, touch it all. Don't be scared of nothing. Like, touch it all. Go do it. Even if you're scared, touch it anyway. And like, I took that to heart as like a 10-year-old, you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, touch it all. Okay, Aunt Emily, go for it. So it's not that I don't have fear. And it's just, I appreciate fear for what it is. It just doesn't drive the car for me. Fear, I'm like, okay, so I deal with fear kind of how I deal with grief. Like, I'm like, okay, fear, hey, what's up? You got something to tell me? Cool. Hey, thank you for that. But I'm like, thank you for the information. I'm going to make my own informed decision. Right? As opposed to fear being like, you can't do that. Actually, I can, because I've got agency. You're just part of my experience, right? Like, so thank you for that. Sharon, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, the gap I think we're looking for is between what we feel and how we act.
Yeah.
Not between the incident and how we feel, because fear may come, may be really strong. But as one of my teachers, this Tibetan teacher, Sonny Rinpoche, said about thoughts in that case, he said, it's not the thought that's the problem, it's the glue. So you could almost say it's not the arising of the fear or the emotion that's the problem. It's how we take it to heart. We believe it utterly. We dive into it, or we hate it and we're ashamed of it, which is also an ineffective reaction to it. So with whatever tools, I'm just so grateful that I had tools. In my case, it was really meditation practice that allowed me to, first of all, look at fear as fear and understand them. Whereas I've said many times, maybe I've said here before, something I've seen looking at my own fears, that unlike the world's pronouncement, which is also true, of course, that we're afraid of the unknown, I get really afraid when I think I do know and it's going to be really bad. And so all the stories I tell myself, well, that's going to happen, then that's going to happen. Then you're going to go back to New York and you haven't been there in months. You can turn on the faucet. What were those symptoms of Legionnaire's disease? I said everyone was getting from, and like, I bet I have it. I have it already. I haven't even been to New York, and that's sort of what happens. And if I see that, I can say to myself, you don't know. And for me, that's a relief. It's like, oh, there's space. I don't know. Instead of being so embroiled in the story. So I think with whatever means of introspection, there's a lot of power in learning our own relationship to fear and how we might perpetuate it and how we can, even in the face of it, be okay.
Because fear has a place, right? Fear definitely has a place in the human experience. Yeah. It just is not meant to be the be all end all. Fear informs, like there are things that I've been afraid of where I'm like, thank you, instinct, for reminding me of this because you saved my life. So there is that biological imperative. Yeah. But it's not always like the philosophical imperative is what we're talking about, right? Like, Sheila, thank you. Anyone else care to offer anything into the space? All is welcome.
One thing we talked about in our group is that sometimes you have a general sense of fear, but you don't really understand it very well. Mm-hmm. So, looking at it, writing about it, contemplating it, whatever, might make it be a smaller thing than this just general sense of fear that we sometimes have that keeps us from living.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else? Barbara.
I just I was trying to write down what Sharon said about it's what we feel versus how we act.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not so much really versus, but that's the gap between how we feel and how we'll act. Because I want to pick up a little bit also on what Michelle was just saying, that there are lots of ways we can come to a different relationship with some really difficult feelings. And, you mentioned journaling or writing about it or, looking at it directly, which would be meditation or introspection, some kind of reflection. And if we can do that, then it's like we have an opportunity, because there could be any amount of fear and we're not, making terrible decisions and moving out of our apartment, out of fear of the water or something.
And that's one of the things that this period is about specifically, is to talk through some of the ways that we can process this stuff. Like, I'm an avid journaler, and like there are many journal entries like, I'm terrified right now, or like, what in the world is happening? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, and Sharon mentioned this too. An empty page for a writer can be two things. It can be like a opportunity for like excitement or an opportunity for terror. But like in my journal writing, it's an opportunity for excitement because it's just this whole open space that I get to like explore. Like, what is truly going on here? Like, and ask all the questions. Like, where is this coming from? Is this real? If it's real, what am I going to do about it? Like all of these sorts of things, so that at the end of the entry, which can vary anywhere from a page to 20, but just like I have a felt sense of release, which is all the fear and grief for me are similar in that all they ask is us to pay attention. and pay attention in a way that can inform from dharmic, from Buddhist practice, wise action, right? And skillful means, right? Like, so giving fear an opportunity to dance with it, be like, okay, I see you, like you say this, is this really true? Gives you an opportunity to settle in a place that's more true than simply viewing a situation simply from the lens of fear. Miriam, yeah.
Can I just say one other thing? We talked a lot in our group about journaling, and I have been, journaling for, forever. And what I found is when I turned 60, I started writing like with a different mindset and trying to flip it to like what was good that was happening versus always like the terror and the fear and, oh, this is all so wrong. I mean, I would write that, but then I'd also start writing like from a different perspective. And it really has helped change my brain and then how I approach other pieces of life that are fearful or this or that I'm not always writing from the catastrophe. It's like, okay, what have I learned from this? What is this really telling me?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's like a very positive tool for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Barbara. Miriam, and then Eugenia.
You know what Barbara said brings up another thing that we talked about in our group, is that she just talked about the difference between before 60 and after 60, and the difference between how she was able to manage things. And we also talked about how the difference between the fears that young people have versus the fears that people who are a little bit older have, because there's so much like there was just another school shooting, and climate change and things like that I know that I'm not, I'm a little bit older, so I'm not as personally afraid of what's going to I don't have any grandkids. I what's going to happen in the next 30 years, I'm not scared, but I imagine that there are a lot of people who are really afraid of what's going to happen in the next 30 years. Who are younger than me.
That's I wrote that down, fears of the young versus fears of those who are older, because that's a rich topic that we could definitely explore and could be one of the features. Eugenia.
Yes, thank you. We have a very interesting conversation in our group, but the things that were mentioned was that fear was related to loss, the same as was mentioned by Sima in the chat.
Yeah.
And it's also of the unknown and the inevitable. The thing that I also wanted to add about what Miriam said is that we had a slight discussion, but we were over the end, so we couldn't continue. But how do we stand at different ages and different moments of our life to the fear of death? It's really different, the way our perspective and how we speak about it. So sometimes I feel that I can speak about it from my 40 years old, but I don't know how it feels in another age. So when I get older, I don't know. Although we are all we have all fear of death, we don't know anything. It can be around the corner for all of us. Yet it's different how you stand to it, towards it. So I think that's an important point.
Yeah, for sure. I thank you for that. I'll offer one thing, and then Sharon, I'll give it to you to close with some reflections and some practice. My 96-year-old grandmother, who I've mentioned fondly often, she has so my family has had 5 deaths in the past month. Like, one was her oldest son, 2 were her best friends, and 2 more were others in our line, right? This woman's faith is so profound. And Eugenia, you this is like your mentioning of your comment brought this to mind. Like, she's in failing health, but we got together a couple weeks ago for my father's birthday, and I held my grandmother's hand as she blessed the meal. And she referred to all the death that we've experienced as a tough couple of weeks. Right? It wasn't this, whoa, everything sucks kind of thing. She's like, God, I've had a rough couple of weeks, but thank you for allowing me to still be here with my family, and hopefully we can be of service to others going forward. Y'all, that blew my mind. That blew my mind. Like, you've lost two of your best friends, your eldest son, and you call it a tough couple of weeks. So when we talk about sitting at the feet of the elders, like, I felt as though that's why I try and do it, because like that perspective just was totally, I still don't have words for it, because the strength, the perspective, like the long game, right? It just but Eugenia, thank you for your comment, because it brought that to top of mind. It's something that I'm still in my journal entries. Like, can I be like that tomorrow? Maybe not, but like, I'm trying for it, because like that perspective, that resilience, that grace is to live for. Sharon, please take us home.
Yeah, thank you. I want to maybe respond a bit to that idea of age and death, but also even before then, I really have seen in my own life, and I honor it so much, that having a regular practice of something, is really important, because the times, I know for a lot of people say it's meditation, the times it seems easiest to let go of is when things are kind of mellow, and you're not driven by some intense dissatisfaction or difficulty, and things are okay, and you think, well, I'm fine, but I think that it's this kind of steadiness of something that we go to repeatedly, whatever it feels like. Sometimes any kind of practice will feel glorious, and sometimes it's boring, and it's just the day after day, or however often you do it, the regularity of returning, that gives us a kind of inner strength when, if the time comes that the bottom does fall out, and we're in much more extreme state, because a lot more extreme things are happening in our lives, and we've got it. So it's a little bit like strength training, and so I just really honor like the kind of regularity of practice, whatever your practice might be, that involves introspection and looking at things we're usually too busy to look at, and developing a more balanced relationship to them, so we can hang out with them and learn, and so on. And then in terms of, clearly, as we get older, and I speak as a much older person than I used to be, like in the most dreamlike way, life has advanced, and it's like outrageous. But anyway, that is certainly true. But there's also a truth that I am one person, for example, whose life was touched by death very early, because my mother died when I was 9 years old. And there are many, many children and young adults, like, as you say, the school shootings. I know some of those people whose lives have been affected by gun violence, but it's kind of a tragedy in this country that we don't really talk about these things. So it's not even so much that, there's not a perspective or a kind of fear of death, or a yearning to somehow try to understand something. I think it is, but we're left alone with it, and not really able to sort of say, well, yeah, that really affected me, that everyone wanted to spare me pain, never wanted to talk about my mother, for example, something like that. And so we have one another, and I think that's a really valuable part of a community, is to be able to bring this out. So why don't we sit together just for a couple of minutes, and then we'll close. You can just let whatever move through your body, move through your emotional landscape. You can rest your attention on something like the feeling of the breath, so that there is an anchor. And thank you. Missy?
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Reggie. Thank you, everybody who has participated in this call. A few quick housekeeping things we wanted to inform you of. First, Sharon referenced a poem, The Art of Disappearing. I am putting a link in the chat now. It's a beautiful poem if anybody would like to take a look at it. The next is I'm really excited, maybe more excited than normal, to announce our next Sitting at the Feet of Elders. We're going to shake things up a little bit. Reggie will be joined by co-host Mirabai Bush, and our special guest will be Sharon Salzberg talking about her new book, Real Life. And so, Sharon, you haven't been a guest on our podcasts ever. This is so exciting. So I want to, again, I'm multitasking here. I want to send you all the link to that. So please register for it. And there's a link on that website too, but her book is on pre-sale right now. So if you want to get a little bit of a pre-read, you can do that. I will give this group a little insight that we are going to start a Wellbeing Network book club, and Sharon's will be the first book. So in late May or early June, we'll be doing an entire webinar dedicated to the book, not just the book in relation to eldership, which will be what the next Sitting at the Feet of Elders is about. And so with that, we really do thank you all for spending your time with us. And this recording will go on our website, as are all of our past 3 years of webinars, if you're interested in re-listening or taking a look at any of them. And with that, please turn off your cameras and say goodbye, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Great to meet you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Blessings,
you.
gratitude.